Hey there, welcome back. I'm here to help you relax tonight. Before we slip into the shadows, like and subscribe to uncover more stories like this. Let me know in the comments where are you listening from and what time is it there. It really brings our community together. Now, dim the lights for that cozy vibe and stick around till the end. Let's dive into the unknown. The thing about Hollowbridge, Massachusetts, is that it doesn't look haunted. Not in the way people expect from a town that sent 14 souls to the gallows during the witch trials of 1692. The white-painted churches still stand proud against the autumn sky, their steeples reaching toward a heaven that seemed to turn its back on this place 3 centuries ago. Colonial houses line streets named after virtues their first inhabitants claimed to possess. Faith Street, Grace Avenue, Mercy Lane, though mercy was the one thing in short supply when the accusations started flying. What visitors notice, if they notice anything at all, is how the town seems frozen in a particular kind of New England charm, how the residents speak with accents that belong more to the 17th century than the 21st, using phrases like dreadful sorry and I reckon, without a trace of irony. How everyone seems to know everyone else's business with an intimacy that feels both quaint and slightly oppressive. What they don't notice, what they couldn't notice unless they tried to leave after sunset, is that Hollowbridge has 7 bridges connecting it to the outside world, and every single one of them becomes impassable the moment darkness falls. Not physically impassable. The wooden planks don't vanish, the stone arches don't crumble. But cross one of those bridges after dark, and you'll find yourself walking in circles, arriving back where you started no matter how straight you swear you walked. The locals know better than to try. In Hollowbridge, bridges are forbidden after dark. The rule. My name is Tim Mercer, and I've lived in Hollowbridge for all 17 years of my life. Which means I've spent 17 years learning rules that make no sense to anyone born beyond our 7 bridges. The bridge rule was taught early, the way children learn not to touch hot stoves or wander into traffic. My mother would take my hand as we crossed Covenant Bridge on our way home from the grocery store, and she'd always glance at the sky, calculating how much daylight remained. If sunset was within an hour, she'd quicken her pace, her grip on my hand tightening until my fingers went numb. "We don't cross bridges after dark, Timothy," she'd say, using my full name the way she did when something was serious. Not ever, not for any reason. When I was 8, I asked why. My mother's face went pale in a way that had nothing to do with the winter cold. She looked at me with eyes that held something between fear and sadness and said, "Because some doors only open one way, and we don't want to find out what's on the other side." That non-answer was the closest anyone came to explaining the rule for the next 9 years. Elder Clark's warning. The first real glimpse of truth came from Elder Nathan Clark, one of the town selectmen who traced his lineage back to the founding families. He was a tall man with shoulders broad enough to suggest he'd done manual labor in his youth, though his hands were too smooth, too uncalloused for someone who claimed to have worked the land for 60 years. It was late October, the season when Hollowbridge becomes briefly famous among leaf peepers and colonial history enthusiasts. A tourist had tried to cross Redemption Bridge after sunset on a dare, and the town was abuzz with whispered conversations that stopped whenever young ears drew near. Elder Clark found me sitting on the steps of the Congregational Church, sketching the cemetery where moss-covered headstones leaned at angles that suggested the earth beneath them was uneasy. "You're Constance Mercer's boy," he said, settling beside me with the careful movements of someone whose body was older than it appeared. "You've got her gift for seeing details others miss." He gestured to my sketchbook, where I'd been trying to capture the way certain graves seemed darker than others, as if they cast shadows even when the sun was directly overhead. "Those 14 graves there," Elder Clark said, pointing to a section of the cemetery set slightly apart from the rest. "Those are the innocents, the ones who were hanged for witchcraft in 1692. 14 souls who died screaming their innocence while the whole town watched." "I know the history," I said. "We learn about it in school every year." "You know the story the town tells itself," Elder Clark corrected. "But stories are like bridges, Timothy. They can carry you from one place to another, but they don't always tell you what's underneath, holding them up." He fell silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on those 14 graves. When he finally spoke again, his voice carried the ritual cadence of someone reciting something memorized long ago. When the hanging tree bore its bitter fruit and innocent blood watered unholy ground, something shifted. The boundaries between this world and the next grew thin. Spirits walked, looking for justice or revenge or simply a way back to the lives that had been stolen from them. But the spirits weren't the only ones who noticed that the walls had worn thin. There were others, old things from across the water, from the hills and hollows of Ireland where the first settlers had fled. The old people called them pucha, shapeshifters, tricksters, beings that could wear any face, take any form, slip between worlds as easily as you or I might cross a bridge. Elder Clark turned to look at me then, and his eyes held something that made my skin prickle with goosebread. "They came across the bridges, Timothy, not the wooden ones or the stone ones, the bridges between worlds, and they made a bargain with the town. A terrible, necessary bargain that's kept Hollowbridge standing for 300 years. Questioning the rules. At 17, I developed a healthy skepticism toward the stories adults told to keep children obedient. Elder Clark's tale of putza and bargains had the flavor of folklore meant to reinforce the bridge taboo, nothing more. But skepticism requires evidence to sustain it, and evidence in Hollowbridge was strange. I started paying attention to things I'd previously dismissed as quirks of small-town life. How no one ever seemed to age quite right. My history teacher, Mr. Whitaker, had taught my mother when she was in high school, and he looked exactly the same in photos from 30 years ago as he did standing at the front of my classroom. How the town records showed births, but remarkably few deaths, and those that were recorded involved people who'd supposedly moved away first. How everyone in Hollowbridge spoke with intimate knowledge of colonial-era customs and traditions, not from study but from what seemed like muscle memory. Most suspicious of all was how the town related to its own history. Most places with dark pasts either commercialize them or try to move beyond them. Salem, just 50 miles south, had built an entire tourist industry around its witch trials, but Hollowbridge treated 1692 like an open wound that had never quite healed, something too tender to touch or examine too closely. Sarah's observations. Sarah Winters was the only person my age who understood my suspicions. She'd moved to Hollowbridge 3 years earlier when her mother married Lewis Winters, one of the founding family descendants who seemed to materialize whenever someone from outside showed interest in settling in town. Sarah had grown up in Boston, where bridges were just bridges, and history stayed safely in the past where it belonged. She noticed things that those of us born to Hollowbridge had learned not to see. "Have you ever noticed how no one here uses contractions from before 1700? She asked one afternoon as we sat by Covenant Bridge, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. Like, they'll say don't or can't because those entered common usage in the 1600s, but won't? That didn't become standard until the 1700s. Everyone here says will not instead, every single time. I'd never noticed, but once she pointed it out, I couldn't unhear it. And the clothes, Sarah continued, warming to her subject. Like, Obviously, people wear modern clothes, but watch how they move in them. Mrs. Holbrook constantly tries to gather her t-shirt like it's a long skirt. Mr. Garrison does this thing with his jacket that only makes sense if you're used to wearing a doublet. It's like they learned to dress modern but never quite learned to be modern. "What are you saying?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "I'm saying everyone in this town is performing being from the 21st century, but they're really from someone else. I'm saying maybe Elder Clark's story wasn't folklore. Maybe it was a confession." The Stranger's Mirror. The catalyst arrived on a gray November morning when an antique dealer from Providence pulled into town with a truck full of colonial-era artifacts she'd acquired from an estate sale. Among the spinning wheels and pewter dishes was an item that made every adult in the market square go silent and still. It was a mirror, not large, perhaps 2 feet tall, but ancient. Its silvered glass was dark and mottled, its wooden frame carved with symbols I recognized from my sketches of the old town seal. Symbols that predated the English settlement, that looked like they belonged to something older and more primal than Puritan Christianity. "That's a scrying glass," the dealer explained to a small crowd that had gathered with expressions ranging from fascination to horror. "Irish, I think. 17th century, maybe earlier. Founded in a house that was brought over piece by piece from County Cork. The family claimed it was cursed, used for looking between worlds." Elder Clark pushed through the crowd, his face drained of color. "That needs to leave Hollowbridge, now, before sunset." But the dealer, unaware of local customs and motivated by the possibility of a sale, had already quoted a price that made Elder Clark's mouth thin to a hard line. Before anyone could stop me, before I fully understood what I was doing or why, I heard my own voice saying, "I'll buy it." The money came from 2 years of summer landscaping work and birthday gifts, handed over in cash while Elder Clark stared at me with an expression that mixed anger with something that looked disturbingly like resignation. "Some lessons can only be learned the hard way," he said quietly. "But Timothy, remember this. When you look into that glass after dark, you're not just seeing a reflection. You're seeing what's on the other side of the bridge. And once you've seen it, once you know it's there, you can never unsee it." The first night. I set up the mirror in my bedroom, propping it against the wall opposite my window where it could catch the fading afternoon light. My parents were away in Concord visiting relatives, a trip that had been planned for months and couldn't be postponed. I was alone in the house, which felt significant in a way I couldn't quite name. As sunset approached, I locked my bedroom door and settled into the chair I'd positioned facing the glass. My reflection looked back at me, 17 years old, dark hair that never laid quite flat, eyes that my grandmother had called storm-colored. Unremarkable, entirely normal. Then the sun touched the horizon and everything changed. The shift was subtle at first. My reflection's movements began to lag a fraction of a second behind my own actions, like video buffering over a slow connection. Then the lag grew longer, more pronounced, until my reflection was moving independently of my body entirely. It, looked exactly like me, but something in the posture was wrong. The way the shoulders sat, the angle of the head, the expression that flickered across features I recognized but couldn't quite claim as my own. When the reflection spoke, the voice was mine, but the words were not. "You're younger than I expected," it said, studying me with open curiosity. "Less worn by the weight of what you carry. But then, you don't know what you're carrying yet, do you?" My mouth had gone dry, my heart hammering against my ribs. "You're a puka." The reflection tilted its head, and the gesture was mine but also not mine, familiar but fundamentally alien. "Is that what Clark told you? That we're puka?" Shapeshifters from Irish folklore come to steal your lives and wear your faces. Isn't it true? Truth is a bridge, the reflection said. And like all bridges in Hollow Bridge, it only goes one way unless you know the secret of crossing. What Clark told you is true from a certain perspective. We are what your ancestors called Puka. We did cross from the old country when the boundaries grew thin. We did make a bargain. The reflection leaned closer to the glass, and I could see my own features arranged in an expression of deep sadness. But we're not the thieves in this story, Timothy. We're the ones who were stolen from. The truth revealed. Over the next hour, my reflection told me a story that rewrote everything I thought I knew about Hollow Bridge. In 1692, when 14 innocent people were hanged for witchcraft, their deaths created a tear in the fabric of reality. Innocent blood spilled by a fearful, self-righteous community opened doorways that were meant to stay closed. The 14 souls didn't pass cleanly into death. They were caught, suspended between worlds, their innocent suffering creating a kind of spiritual vacuum. The Puka noticed. They always noticed when the walls grew thin. But the Puka who came weren't predators looking for prey. They were refugees, fleeing persecution in Ireland, where Christianity had branded them demons and fairy kind, where iron and prayer were pushing the old magic further into the margins. They saw the opening created by Hollowbridge's sin and thought they'd found sanctuary. We offered a trade, my reflection said. The 14 souls trapped between worlds were suffering, neither living nor dead, unable to move forward or back. We offered to take their place in that liminal space, to be the ones trapped between worlds, if they would take our place in the living world. We'd carry their suspended deaths, and they'd live our confiscated lives. But the people of Hollowbridge, the guilty ones, the ones who'd made false accusations, who'd stood by while innocent neighbors died, they learned what was happening, and they saw an opportunity. Why let the innocent 14 return to life when they could make the same bargain themselves? My reflection's expression twisted with ancient bitterness. They tricked us, made us think we were trading with the innocent souls, when really we were trading with their murderers. We stepped across the bridge into suspension, and the guilty ones stepped across into our lives. The 14 innocents were pushed even further from life, trapped on the wrong side of every bridge, unable to cross back because the bargain had been made with the wrong souls. That's why the living people of Hollowbridge look young for their ages, I said slowly, working through the implications. They're not aging normally because they're not really human. They're Pucha wearing human faces. And living Puka lives while we're trapped in the space between, carrying deaths that aren't ours, suspended in a 300-year exile. Verification. Prove it, I said. If what you're saying is true, show me the 14. Show me the innocent souls who've been trapped even longer than you. My reflection nodded. Walk to any bridge after dark. Don't try to cross. You know that doesn't work. The bargain holds the bridges closed. But stand at the threshold between Hollowbridge and the outside world and look into the water beneath. They're there. They've always been there, waiting for someone from inside the bargain to finally see them. At 9 o'clock, I left the house and walked through streets gone quiet and dark. The Hollow Bridge I knew in daylight was a place of careful normalcy, but after dark it transformed into something else, something watchful and waiting, as if the town itself was holding its breath. Redemption Bridge was the closest, a stone arch spanning the Witch Brook where, according to local legend, several of the accused had been tested by water trial. I'd crossed it 1,000 times in daylight, but I'd never stood on it after sunset. The bridge itself looked the same as it always did, But when I leaned over the low stone wall and looked down into the dark water below, I saw them. 14 faces looking up at me from beneath the surface. Not drowning, not swimming, just existing in impossible suspension. I recognized some of them from historical records. Rebecca Holt, who'd been hanged for consorting with the devil when she was really just a midwife with more skill than the town fathers could explain. Samuel Goodwin, a farmer who'd spoken against the trials and paid for his conscience with his life. Martha Preston, barely 15 when she was condemned, younger than I was now. They looked exactly as they must have looked in 1692, wearing homespun and linen, their faces bearing expressions of infinite patience and equally infinite sadness. When Martha Preston met my eyes, her mouth formed words I couldn't hear but somehow understood. "Help us." I stumbled back from the bridge's edge, my breath coming in sharp gasps. At every other bridge I visited that night, Covenant Bridge, Faith Crossing, Mercy Span, Hope's Arch, Grace Bridge, and Penitence Way, the scene repeated. 14 faces beneath each bridge, the same faces, trapped in every threshold between Hollow Bridge and the world beyond. Trapped where they'd been pushed when the bargain went wrong, suspended in the space that should have been temporary sanctuary but became an eternal prison. The proposition. When I returned home, my reflection was waiting in the mirror, but she wasn't alone. Behind her, I could see others, faces that looked almost but not quite like people I knew from town. The real Puka, trapped in the space between worlds while their lives were stolen. "Now you understand," my reflection said. "The people you call neighbors, the ones who raised you and taught you and warned you never to cross bridges after dark, they're not your people. They're thieves wearing stolen faces, living in a town built on compound betrayal. They betrayed the 14 innocents, and they betrayed us." "What do you want from me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "We can't break the bargain from this side," my reflection said. "The magic that binds it was made by those who still live, and only the living can unmake it." "But you're different, Timothy. You're the child of 2 Puxa wearing human faces. You're half made of the magic that sustains the bargain, half rooted in the lives that were stolen. You can walk between worlds in ways neither we nor the 14 can manage." "There's a ritual," she continued. "On the anniversary of the first hanging, November 18th next week, stand on Redemption Bridge at midnight. Shatter the mirror at the exact moment between one day and the next. The breaking will break the bargain, unmake the theft. The Puxa will be free to return to their own forms, their own lives, and the 14 will finally be allowed to pass on to whatever lies beyond this suspended suffering." "What happens to Hollow Bridge?" I asked. "What happens to the people who've been living these stolen lives?" My reflection's expression softened. "They won't die, if that's what you're asking. They'll revert to their original forms. Pusa can live for centuries in their natural state, but they'll lose their human faces, their human lives. They'll become what they were always meant to be, wanderers, shapeshifters, belonging to the liminal spaces between civilization and wilderness. They'll have to leave Hollow Bridge and never return. And the 14? We'll be free. We'll be able to choose, finally, whether to move forward into death or back into life. The choice that should have been theirs 3 centuries ago. The decision." I spent the next week in a fog of indecision, avoiding Elder Clark and the other adults who seemed to sense that something had shifted, that I'd learned truths I wasn't supposed to know. Sarah was the only person I told. We sat in the cemetery, among those 14 graves that marked lives stolen and never recovered, and I laid out everything I'd learned. So, everyone we know, everyone who's ever lived in Hollow Bridge since 1692, they're all Puka wearing stolen human forms? Sarah asked. her voice careful and controlled in the way it got when she was processing something overwhelming. "Not everyone," I said. "People who married in from outside, like your mother, they're human. But the founding families, the ones who trace their lineage back to colonial times, they're the descendants of Putsa, pretending to be the descendants of the murderers who made the original bargain, including your parents." I nodded, the weight of that truth sitting heavy in my chest. My parents who'd raised me, who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped with homework and attended every school event no matter how insignificant. They were kind people, good people by any measure that mattered. But their entire existence was built on a theft they'd benefited from without committing. The people who actually made the bargain, the ones who betrayed the 14 and tricked the Pusa, they're long dead, Sarah pointed out. Everyone living in Hollowbridge now is just living the lives they were born into. They didn't choose this. But the 14 didn't choose their imprisonment either, I countered. Neither did the Putsa. And every day that goes by is another day of injustice, another day those innocent souls are trapped in bridges, waiting for someone to care enough to free them. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the worn letters on Martha Preston's headstone. "What do you want to do, Tim?" I looked around the cemetery, at the evidence of 300 years of life built on stolen foundations, at graves that marked deaths that weren't real deaths, lineages that weren't real lineages, a community that had sustained itself through compound betrayal and willful forgetting. "I want to make it right," I said finally, "even if it costs everything, even if it means losing the life I've known and the people I love. Some things matter more than comfort. Justice matters more. Truth matters more." Sarah took my hand and squeezed it. "Then I'll help you, whatever you need." The ritual. November 18th came cold and clear, the sky so full of stars they looked like frost scattered across black velvet. I waited until my parents were asleep, these Pusa who wore my parents' faces and had raised me with genuine love despite the lie at the heart of their existence. I left a note on the kitchen table, though I knew no words could adequately explain what I was about to do or why. All I managed to write was, "I'm sorry, but some debts are too old and too deep to leave unpaid. Thank you for loving me. I hope someday you'll understand." Sarah met me at Redemption Bridge, carrying the antique mirror wrapped in blankets. We'd spent the week researching the ritual, piecing together fragments from old records and the whispered guidance of my reflection, who spoke only after dark. At 11:55 p.m., we unwrapped the mirror and positioned it at the exact center of the bridge, angled so it reflected both the water below and the sky above. In its dark glass, I could see my reflection and the others, dozens of Pucha trapped between worlds, their faces bright with hope and fear. In the water beneath the bridge, the 14 waited, their expressions unreadable. "You're sure about this?" Sarah asked, her breath fogging in the cold air. "No," I admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." At 11:59, as my phone's clock ticked toward midnight, I picked up the hammer we'd brought. My reflection looked back at me one final time, and I saw in her features the echo of everything I might have been if I'd been allowed to live an honest life. "Thank you," she said. "Whatever happens next, whatever you become, thank you for choosing truth over comfort." The clock struck midnight. I brought the hammer down. The breaking. The mirror didn't shatter so much as it dissolved, the glass turning to liquid silver that flowed across the bridge and poured over the edges into the water below. The moment it touched the brook, light erupted from beneath the surface, not harsh or blinding, but soft and warm, like sunrise after an impossibly long night. The 14 rose from the water, still wearing their 17th century clothes, but somehow more solid, more real than they'd appeared in my previous glimpses. They stepped onto the bridge, their bare feet making no sound on the stone, their faces transformed by expressions that mixed joy with relief, with the kind of deep exhaustion that comes from carrying an unbearable weight for far too long. Martha Preston looked the youngest, but when she met my eyes, I saw centuries in her gaze. "You freed us," she said, her voice carrying an accent that belonged to a Massachusetts that had been dead for 300 years. After all this time, someone finally chose justice over complicity. "What will you do now?" I asked. "We'll choose," said Rebecca Holt, and the word carried such weight, such significance. "For the first time since 1692, we'll have the right to choose our own fates. Some of us may move on to whatever lies beyond. Some may choose to return, to reclaim life if we can, but the choosing, that's what matters. That's what was stolen and has now been restored." As she spoke, I felt the change beginning in myself. The Pusa magic that had always been part of me, inherited from parents who were themselves Pusa in human form, was waking up, recognizing itself, reshaping me into something that matched my true nature. My skin prickled and shifted, my bones ached with the memory of shapes I'd never worn but somehow knew. I was becoming something else, something other, something true. "Will it hurt?" Sarah asked, watching the transformation with wide eyes. "No," said one of the 14, Samuel Goodwin, the farmer who'd spoken against injustice and paid for it with his life. "The Pusa nature is fluid, adaptive. The boy won't lose himself. He'll just gain the truth of what he always was." The aftermath. Over the following days, Hollowbridge transformed. One by one, the Puka, who'd lived in human form for 3 centuries, found their stolen faces fading, their original natures reasserting themselves. They took forms that matched their true selves. Some animal, some human-shaped but otherworldly, some things that shifted between states too quickly to name. My mother and father changed before my eyes, their familiar features melting into something else. My mother became something like a hare, but larger, more graceful, with eyes that still held the warmth I'd always known. My father took the shape of a red fox with silver-tipped fur and a gaze that conveyed more intelligence than any animal should possess. They didn't speak. Puka, in their natural forms, communicate in ways that don't require words, but I understood them nonetheless. They weren't angry about what I'd done. They were relieved. The weight of maintaining a false life for centuries had been its own kind of imprisonment, and I'd freed them from that as surely as I'd freed the 14 from their bridges. The transformation spread throughout Hollowbridge. Within a week, the town was emptying as Puka in their true forms wandered off into the forests and hills, returning to the liminal spaces where they'd always belonged. The houses stood empty, the streets grew quiet, and the bridges became just bridges again. Ordinary structures spanning ordinary water, no longer bound by ancient bargains or forbidden after dark. Sarah's mother packed up their belongings, bewildered by the exodus but unable to find her husband, who'd taken the form of a crow and flown north toward old-growth forests where the human world hadn't yet reached. Sarah helped her mother leave, but she promised to return. "Someone needs to remember," she said as we stood on Redemption Bridge in broad daylight, watching her mother's car disappear down the road. "Someone needs to tell the true story of what happened here, so the lies don't creep back in. I'll come back, Tim. I'll make sure Hollowbridge's history is recorded honestly this time." The new form, I didn't leave Hollowbridge. Couldn't leave, really. As a child of 2 Pucha, born into the bargain's magic, I'd become something neither fully Pucha nor fully human, a bridge myself, in a way, existing between worlds. My form shifted depending on need and circumstance. Sometimes I appeared human enough to pass in the outside world. Sometimes I took shapes that belonged to the wilderness, deer and hawk and fox, and forms that had no name in human languages. Sometimes I existed in states between neither one thing nor another, comfortable in the ambiguity. The 14 souls each made their choices. Some passed on into death, finally allowed to rest after 3 centuries of suspension. Others chose to return to life, but not in Hollowbridge. They scattered to different cities and towns, determined to live the lives they'd been denied with a fierce appreciation for every moment. Martha Preston was the last to leave. Before she went, she found me in the cemetery where her false grave had stood for 300 years. "What you did required impossible courage," she said. "You sacrificed everything familiar. Everyone you loved, the entire life you knew, all for people you'd never met, for a justice that didn't directly benefit you. That's the rarest kind of heroism, Timothy. The kind that comes with no reward except the knowledge that you did what was right." "I didn't feel heroic," I admitted. "I just felt like I couldn't live with myself if I walked away from the truth." "That's what makes it heroic," Martha said. She touched my cheek with fingers that were somehow both ancient and 15 years old. "Thank you. For all of us. Thank you." Then she walked away, down a road that led to a future she'd earned the right to choose for herself. The ending. I stayed in Hollowbridge through that first winter, living in the house that had belonged to my parents, tending the cemetery where 14 false graves marked 300 years of sustained injustice. The town was empty of human habitation, but it wasn't empty of life. Puka returned sometimes in ones and twos to walk the streets in their true forms and remember what it had been like to live in human shapes. My parents came back several times, my mother in her hare form, my father as the red fox. We'd sit together in the house where I'd grown up, and though we no longer spoke in words, I understood their love for me hadn't changed with their forms. If anything, it had deepened. No longer complicated by the lies they'd had to maintain, the false history they'd had to perform. In spring, Sarah returned as promised. She'd enrolled in a graduate program in folklore and American studies, and she'd chosen Hollowbridge as her thesis project. Together, we documented the true history, the witch trials, the bargain, the theft, the 300-year exile, and the breaking that had restored truth and choice to those who'd been denied both. Her thesis became a book, and the book became required reading in American history classes that wanted to grapple honestly with the complicated legacies of colonial violence and supernatural consequence. But most people who read it thought it was fiction, a cleverly constructed allegory about guilt and community complicity, and the debts history leaves unpaid. Only those with eyes trained to see the spaces between what's said and what's meant understood that every word was true. The Pusa still exist, still moving through the world, wearing whatever shapes suit their purposes. But they no longer live stolen lives in a Massachusetts town built on compound betrayal. They've returned to their proper place, the margins and the wild spaces, the forests and the fens, the liminal territories where the human world meets something older and stranger. The 14 souls found peace, some in death, some in new lives, all in the restoration of choice that should never have been taken from them. And I remain in Hollowbridge, a shapeshifter guarding an empty town, ensuring that its bridges stay free and its truths stay told. Some nights, when the boundary between worlds grows thin, I walk those 7 bridges in forms that shift with each crossing, and I remember what it cost to break a bargain 3 centuries old. But the cost was worth it. Justice is always worth the price, even when that price is everything you've ever known. This is what remains, an empty town, 7 bridges that are finally just bridges, and the legacy of a 17-year-old boy who discovered that some debts are too deep and too old to leave unpaid, and that the hardest choices, the ones that cost everything, are often the only ones worth making. The bridges are free now, and so are we all. Here's the wrap for now, until we meet again. If this tale kept you on edge, like and share it with a friend who dares to listen, and subscribe for more eerie nights like this one. Thanks for unwinding with me. Sleep tight if you can,